I knew something was wrong the moment the front door shut behind me. The mansion was too quiet. No footsteps, no distant chatter, no sound of staff moving through the halls. Only the echo of my shoes hitting the cold marble floor. I came home early to check my security protocols, but instead, I walked straight into a moment that changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, danger, and the girl who worked under my roof. A faint rustling sound drifted from my private study. That room was off-limits to everyone. I reached instinctively for the weapon hidden in my jacket and moved silently toward the door, which was slightly open. A thin line of warm light cut across the hallway floor like a warning. Then I heard voices. One male, one female. The male voice was unfamiliar. The female voice shook with fear. Then I recognized her. Rosalie, my new maid. Quiet, polite, invisible. Not the type of woman I ever imagined finding inside my personal study. My heartbeat tightened as I pushed the door open. What I saw made my blood turn cold. Rosalie stood frozen beside my open safe with documents clutched in her trembling hands. A man dressed in black was taking pictures of everything inside. When he saw me, he bolted straight through the window and vanished into the garden before I could even draw my weapon. But Rosalie didn't run. She didn't speak. She didn't even breathe. Then she looked at me, her brown eyes wide with terror, and whispered one thing that made my entire world tilt. Stay silent. Her voice shook, barely louder than a breath. They have men watching the house. If they think you found us, they will kill us both. Please, don't move. That whisper shouldn't have affected me. I was a man who controlled weapons, armies, and empires. Yet her fear pulled at something deep in my chest. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady, despite the rage building inside me. You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you killed. Rosalie swallowed hard. She walked toward me slowly, as if every step hurt. I smelled lavender on her, light and soft against the heavy panic in the room. I didn't have a choice, she said, holding out the papers with shaking hands. They have my brother. They threatened to kill him if I didn't get these documents. I stared at her. I didn't trust easily. In my world, trust was a luxury that got people killed. But the terror in her eyes wasn't fake. It was too raw, too real, too desperate. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. They forced me to spy on you. I swear I didn't want to. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway. Rosalie panicked and pressed her finger to her lips. Please, she whispered again, stay silent. They're listening. Something in her fear, something in the way she stood her ground, forced me to think instead of react. I grabbed a business card, scribbled a question on the back, and handed it to her. How many men? She wrote back quickly. 4. 2 in the garden. 1. Watching cameras. 1. Close by. Her handwriting shook as she handed it back, but her expression was strong. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't just a maid anymore. I raised my voice, pretending to scold her for anyone listening. Your performance has been unsatisfactory. Her eyes widened in confusion until she realized what I was doing, creating a cover for us both. She lowered her head. Yes, sir, I apologize. She played the role perfectly. When she moved to walk past me, I caught her elbow. My grip was firm, but my voice dropped to a whisper. Leave nothing behind. I slipped a small gun into her pocket. She stiffened, shocked. She had no idea whether I believed her story or was testing her. Truth was, I didn't know either. I watched her walk away, her shoulders straight even though her hands trembled. A guard greeted her casually as she left through the back entrance. He had no idea she carried a weapon, no idea she carried secrets that could destroy us both. Only after she disappeared through the gates did I let myself breathe. The documents she touched, the look in her eyes, the fear she tried to hide, none of it made sense, until I opened the file she almost stole. My throat tightened. It wasn't just financial papers. It was information about my sister, her school, her medical appointments, her schedule. Someone was targeting my family. Someone had planted spies in my home. Someone had used Rosalie as a weapon. And for the first time in years, I felt something dangerous crawl under my skin. Not anger, not fear, something worse, the feeling that I might lose control. Because Rosalie wasn't just a maid anymore. She had become the one person I needed answers from. And the one person I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about. The mansion felt different after Rosalie walked out of it. Too quiet, too exposed, too vulnerable. My home had always been the safest place in my world, protected by layers of security and loyalty. But after what I found in those stolen files, the walls felt thinner, the shadows darker, and every noise carried a new meaning. Someone had slipped past my defenses. Someone had watched my every move. Someone had studied my sister's life in detail. The rage that built inside me was colder than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was sharp and steady, like a blade pressed against skin. I called Julian, my most trusted man. "We have rats in the walls," I said. "Begin a silent sweep." 15 minutes later, Julian and his team stepped into my study, looking more tense than usual. They moved through the house like ghosts, searching every inch of the mansion. Dust flew. Furniture shifted. Carpets lifted. By nightfall, they placed 17 listening devices on my desk. 17. 3 of them were in my bedroom. The violation hit me hard. Not because it threatened my business, but because Rosalie had been living in this place with no idea she was surrounded by danger. Or maybe she had known. Maybe that was why fear lived in her eyes today. Julian slid a thin folder toward me. "Background check on Rosalie Hayes." At first glance, everything looked clean. A brother with a spinal injury, heavy medical bills, a history of honest work, no criminal record, no suspicious travel. But then Julian hesitated. "There's something else." He placed a photograph on the desk. Rosalie's brother sat in his wheelchair, smiling weakly beside a man whose face I knew better than my own reflection. Diego Navarro. My enemy, my rival, my past. I felt my jaw clench as anger curled deep inside my chest. "When was this taken?" 2 days ago, Julian said. "Navarro's foundation is paying for the boy's treatments." Of course, it was never random, never accidental. Navarro didn't give charity, he bought leverage. And Rosalie had been caught in the center of a war she never asked for. "Find her," I ordered. "Bring her here unharmed." Julian nodded and left with his team. I stayed in the study, staring at the photograph until the edges blurred. I wasn't sure what emotion hit me hardest. Anger at Navarro, guilt for Rosalie, or the strange pressure in my chest that tightened when I thought of her terrified eyes begging me to stay silent. Hours passed. No updates. Until my secure phone rang. "Antonio," Julian said, voice tense. "Her apartment is empty. Signs of a struggle. Neighbors heard a fight an hour ago. She's gone." My heart slammed so hard I felt it in my throat. Gone. Taken. Because of me. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I didn't give myself time to think. Trace her phone. Quote. Minutes later, Julian sent me the location. An abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, Navarro territory. Of course, I armed myself in seconds. Weapons. Knife. Backup clip. Tactical belt. All muscle memory, all instinct. Julian arrived at the mansion with a vehicle, and we drove fast through the night until the city lights faded, replaced by the empty dark of warehouses and broken windows. When we parked on a rooftop overlooking the building, I saw movement through the binoculars. Heat signatures, 8 men inside, 4 outside, and 1 small figure tied to a chair, Rosalie. Her head hung low. Her shoulders were drawn tight from pain. Even from a distance, I felt something inside me twist sharply. She hadn't run. She hadn't betrayed me. She had been taken. "This is a trap," Julian said quietly. "Navarro wants you to come." "I know," I answered. "You shouldn't go in alone." "I have to." Julian grabbed my arm. "Boss, listen. This isn't business anymore. This is personal, and that makes you vulnerable." Maybe he was right, but I didn't care. "I'm going," I said. "Create a distraction in 15 minutes. Pull guards away. I'll get her out." Julian hesitated, then nodded. When I changed into a clean suit instead of tactical gear, his eyes widened. With respect, wearing that will get you killed. I'm not here to start a war, I said. I'm here for her. And it was true. I didn't know why, I didn't know how, but I knew one thing. I was going to bring Rosalie back alive. 15 minutes later, an explosion shook the night. Guards sprinted toward the north entrance. I slipped through the loading dock unnoticed, moving silently between crates and shadows. Every second mattered. Every breath mattered. The warehouse smelled like metal and oil. Lights flickered overhead. My heart pounded not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. I reached the center room and saw her through a small window. Rosalie, her hands tied, her face bruised, her uniform torn. But her eyes were still full of fire, full of strength, full of something I shouldn't have felt but couldn't ignore. A man circled her, talking softly like a snake. He wanted information. He wanted to break her. He didn't know she was stronger than she looked. My grip tightened around my weapon. If he touched her again, I would put a bullet between his eyes. I positioned myself near the door, listening as he leaned close and whispered a truth that made Rosalie freeze. A truth about her parents. A truth about her past. A truth tied to my darkest mistake. My chest tightened painfully. When Rosalie's tears finally fell, I felt something inside me snap. I kicked the door open, and the entire room went silent. She lifted her head. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, I knew. I would burn the world down before letting anyone hurt her again. The moment Rosalie lifted her head and saw me, something inside me shifted. Her eyes were full of fear, confusion, pain, and something else I couldn't name. I had seen countless people break under pressure, but Rosalie, she refused to break. Even tied to a chair, even bleeding, even surrounded by men who wanted her dead. I moved fast. A flashbang hit the floor before anyone processed I had entered. The blinding light bought me a few seconds, enough to take down 2 guards with quiet, controlled shots. I didn't aim to kill, not unless I had to. These men were here for a paycheck. Navarro was the real disease. One man reached for Rosalie. I shot him in the shoulder so he dropped his weapon, then stepped between them, blocking her from view. Her breath hitched when she realized I was standing in front of her. You weren't supposed to come," she whispered. I cut the rope, binding her wrists with a knife. Her skin was bruised and raw. When her hands fell into her lap, she winced in pain. I hated the sight more than I had hated anything in my life. "I came because you're not dying here," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. She stared at me, searching my face for something. Truth, maybe. Or guilt. Or hope. "What he said about my parents," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Was it true?" I didn't lie. Not to her. Not anymore. "Yes," I said quietly. Her breath broke. Her hands shook. Pain filled her eyes, but it was different from the fear she showed earlier. This hurt came from somewhere deeper. "But there's more you don't know," I said. "I wasn't the one who ordered the fire. Navarro was my boss back then. I followed his command. I didn't know there were civilians inside until it was too late." "Too late?" She choked on the words. "They died, Antonio." "I know," I said. "And I've spent years trying to make it right." She looked away, her jaw tight, her eyes wet. She didn't scream. She didn't curse me. Somehow, her silence cut far deeper. Gunfire echoed from the north end of the warehouse, Julian's team holding off reinforcements. Time was running out. "We need to move," I said. I helped her stand. Her legs were unsteady. She leaned against me, gripping my arm for balance. The touch shouldn't have mattered. But it did. As we moved toward the exit, the building shook from another explosion. Smoke rolled in from the hallway. Shadows flickered. Voices shouted orders. Every instinct in me screamed to protect her. We slipped into a side corridor, navigating between crates and old machinery. My hand stayed at the small of her back, guiding her, steadying her. "Why did you come for me yourself?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was soft, almost unsure. I didn't have a clean, strategic answer. I didn't have words that made sense. "I couldn't leave you here," I said. She didn't respond, but her breath hitched. Just enough to tell me she heard something in my voice I hadn't meant to reveal. We reached the emergency exit, but the moment I pushed the door open, 2 gunmen appeared. I shoved Rosalie behind a stack of crates and stepped forward. The fight was quick, violent, dangerous. I took one down with a blow to the throat and shot the second before he could raise his weapon. When I turned back, Rosalie was watching me with wide eyes, not afraid, but stunned. "You're hurt," she said, pointing to a gash across my forearm. "It's nothing," I answered. "It's not nothing," she whispered, and for a moment, her anger cracked enough for concern to slip through. Sirens grew closer outside, police attracted by the earlier explosions. "We need a different plan," I said. "Follow me, no matter what." She nodded weakly. When we stepped out into the open, I dropped my weapon and lifted my hands as police ran toward us. Rosalie leaned into me, playing the part perfectly, letting me support her like she was my injured assistant instead of a maid caught in a war. "Officer," I said calmly, "my employee was kidnapped by these men. We escaped through the back when the gunfire stopped." My tone was steady, confident, believable. This was a mask I had worn many times. The officers looked at Rosalie, her torn clothes, her bruises, her shaking legs, her face buried against my chest. The story didn't need more explanation. They escorted us to their vehicles and cleared a path through the chaos. I didn't let go of her the entire time. Rosalie said nothing, but her fingers gripped my suit tightly, either from pain or fear or something else I wasn't ready to name. Back inside the safety of the police escort, she finally lifted her head and looked at me. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Was anything real, Antonio?" That question hit harder than any bullet. I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't sure I wanted her to know the truth yet. Because the truth was dangerous. For both of us. The police escort brought us back to my mansion just before dawn. The sky was still dark, but the first hints of orange light touched the horizon. Rosalie walked beside me, her steps slow and uneven, her shoulder bleeding through the torn fabric of her dress. I guided her inside, but she didn't look at the chandeliers or the marble floors or the guards that rushed to secure the perimeter. She only looked at me. Her eyes searched every expression I had, looking for the truth I'd hidden for far too long. "Was anything real, Antonio?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to give her a clean answer, something simple and painless. But nothing about us had ever been simple. "The surveillance was real," I said. "The danger was real. My reaction when I found you in my study, all of that was real. And the rest?" Her voice broke. "Hiring me? Knowing who I was? Knowing what your world did to my family?" Quote. I exhaled slowly, no lies, not anymore. At first it was guilt, I admitted. I thought giving you a safe job, taking care of your brother, would balance something I could never undo. Her expression hardened. She took a step back as if my words physically pushed her away. "So I was a project," she whispered. "A way for you to feel better about yourself." "No," I said, stepping closer. "That's what it began as. But that's not what it became." She shook her head, tears threatening again, but this time she blinked them away, refusing to cry in front of me. "You controlled everything," she said. "My job, my home, my brother's medical bills. You helped us, but you also trapped us." Her words tore at something deep inside me. "You're right," I said softly, "but I am trying to change that, to change everything." She froze at the tone of my voice, the sincerity inside it, the truth in it. Before she could respond, Julian appeared in the doorway. "Boss," he said quietly, "we secured your sister. Navarro's men won't get near her now. And we found something else." Quote. I nodded, but my eyes never left Rosalie. Later, when she had rested and her shoulder was treated, I brought her into my study, our first safe moment since everything exploded in that warehouse. She stood stiffly beside the desk, the distance between us filled with all the things we hadn't said. "There's another option," I told her, laying out documents and photos across the table. "We can fight Navarro together." She looked down at the papers, her eyes narrowing as she processed every detail. "You want me to work for you," she said. As a spy. A double agent, I corrected. Pretend Navarro turned you against me. Let him trust you. Let him believe you hate me. Let him use you. She stared at me for a long moment. Her anger shifted into something sharper, purpose. And what about my brother? Quote, he will disappear, I said, temporarily, to keep him safe. I'll protect him myself. And afterward? She asked quietly. What happens to us? Us. She didn't realize what that word did to me. That depends on you, I said. You'll have a choice when this is over. Quote. Rosalie hesitated, but only for a second. Then she nodded. The transformation began immediately. She cut her hair, changed her clothes. She practiced a new posture, new tone, new confidence. She became someone Navarro would never suspect. When she walked into the hospital days later and faced Diego Navarro with cold, perfect hatred, he believed every word she said. Her performance was flawless. Weeks passed in a blur of danger and deception. Rosalie fed us intel. We fed Navarro lies. Every encrypted message she sent carried the risk of her death. Every time she entered his headquarters, my heart tightened in a way I hated admitting. She was brilliant, fearless, reckless, and the most valuable asset I'd ever had. The gala marked the end game. Fire, explosions, bullets, truths none of us were ready for. Inside the smoke-filled chaos, while I fought Navarro face to face, Rosalie, bleeding, exhausted, trembling, raised a gun with both hands and covered me. She could have run. She could have saved herself. She didn't. She chose me, again. And when we finally dragged Navarro out of the collapsing building and into the hands of the police, I stepped into the spotlight for the first time in my life. I exposed everything. His crimes, his lies, the truth about the Hayes Community Center fire. I told the world what he did, and what I failed to stop. Rosalie sat beside her brother in the front row, her hand gripping the armrest as she listened. She didn't look at me, but I felt her presence like a pulse beneath my skin. The months that followed were a storm of rebuilding, restructuring my business, opening community programs, creating shelters, caring for victims of the violence I once helped build. Rosalie stayed, not because she trusted me, not because she forgave me, but because she was part of the mission now, part of the change, part of my world. Late one night, long after everyone else had gone home, she and I stood alone in my study, the same room where everything began. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. You could have let me walk away. I know. You could have left me in that warehouse. I know. Quote. She looked up at me, something fragile and dangerous in her eyes. So why didn't you? I stepped closer. For the same reason you didn't betray me, I said quietly. Because somewhere in all this chaos, something real happened between us. Her breath caught. She didn't deny it. She didn't walk away. She just whispered, almost trembling, what happens now? I reached for her hand, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Now. Now the danger was gone. Now the lies were gone. Now the past was finally buried. What came next wouldn't be built on guilt or secrets or fear. What came next would be real. And when she finally leaned into me, warm, steady, and no longer afraid, I knew. Rosalie Hayes wasn't my maid. She wasn't my spy. She wasn't my enemy. She was the woman who changed the direction of my life. And I wasn't letting her go.